Dinoland USA is going away, and I have to say, that's really disappointing.
Disney is making a lot of sweeping, short-sighted changes to its parks right now, many of which I believe will cost decades and billions of dollars worth of park damage. To put things simply, Disney was the industry leader ever since Disneyland opened in 1955, redefining the amusement park and evolving it into something much more interesting and respectable. Since that time, Disney parks stood out from their competition for many reasons, but mostly through their unique themes and creativity. Disney parks were not places of cynical corporate brand synergy, but were works of art, places that believed they were better than your typical Six Flags. There was thematic depth and detail around every corner, and Disney trusted its audience, its parkgoers, to appreciate attractions outside of just their popular intellectual property. Peter Pan is great, and so are many of the Fantasyland dark rides based on other animated characters, but only Disney could make an attraction like Living with the Land interesting. I have loved many original attractions produced by the company over its many rich decades of creativity, and until the last decade or so, even its IP attractions have been fantastic. There was always a good balance or a reason for their existence, like Fantasyland literally celebrating Disney animation, or the Great Movie Ride celebrating film as art, not just placing franchises in front of you and anticipating that you'll engage with them superficially. For example, Epcot was once a park of hope and optimism, embracing humanistic themes and emphasizing how technology will improve our lives and bring us together globally. Even changes in the 90s and early aughts were plagued with many mistakes, yet still preserved the theme of the park and introduced some of Disney's best attractions like Test Track or Illumination's Reflections of Earth. Watching what has happened under Iger's leadership though, the park has essentially transformed into a hot and ugly Apple Store / Chipotle hybrid with random IP scattered around the place. That's what decades and millions of dollars worth of brand damage looks like, and unfortunately, the next big targets are the Rivers of America, which I covered earlier in the month, and now Dinoland USA. In my opinion, Dinoland is one of Disney's best lands, but it's not perceived that way for two good reasons. First, when it was clear that Animal Kingdom needed additional capacity, and fast, Hester and Hester's Dino-Rama was added to the land, which opened in 2001. While it has a clever, interconnected story that justifies its existence, the average person only saw a cheap carnival in a Disney park. It did not understand how it fit into the larger narrative. The second issue with Dinoland is that, well, people didn't even know there was a narrative, even though it's been around them the entire time. I blame Disney for this one, because there was very much an era where promotional material for the parks often emphasized story and detail. Vacation planning videos would briefly discuss unique features of the parks and resorts, or would provide a bit of backstory of narrative-driven attractions like Typhoon Lagoon or Blizzard Beach. Why were they not emphasizing the story of Dinoland or Africa and Asia? I think these stories and lands go underappreciated, not because park guests are mindless, shallow consumers who only want superficial IP integration, but because art often requires explanation to understand it fully. It's like when you look at a painting in an art gallery that looks abstract and almost random, but it means nothing to you unless you read a placard about the artist's intent, understanding the meaning and emotion behind the paint strokes. Dinoland deserves explanation. Again, because as one of Disney's best lands, I think it goes far underappreciated for what it is, and I'm incredibly frustrated that instead of improving on it and promoting the story, Disney is instead destroying it for more random IP. While I've discussed the story of Dinoland a long time ago in my Disney and Dinosaurs video, I wanted to instead produce a dedicated and more detailed tribute for the land. I wanted to discuss its history, cultural context and importance, and retell the land's story better than I did previously, because again, it does deserve to be better understood. Destroying Dinoland is the sad destruction of art, and with this video, I'm hoping to offer the definitive guide for its story, documenting what makes it so unique and special as one of Disney's most fascinating lands. Just a quick favor before we begin, but if you want to support this video and the channel, hitting the like button does a lot to help out. To understand the context and theming of Dinoland USA, we need to actually go back a bit and understand the themes and goals of Animal Kingdom. When the park was being conceived and developed in the early 90s, the idea of animals in a Disney park pulled well with guests, but it was important to be perceived as something more than just a Disney-branded zoo. Rides and shows would need to be emphasized, and it wasn't enough for the animal exhibits to be educational, but the themes had to inspire, exploring relationships of coexistence between animals and humanity. You can see how this manifested through the colorful, enchanting, decorative elements of the original Safari Village, or how Kilimanjaro Safaris originally had a storyline about exposing elephant poachers, putting you on the side of the animals. Even when there were tie-ins with intellectual property, it was mostly handled in such a way that reinforced the larger themes of the park. For example, It's Tough to Be a Bug was conceptualized as a thrilling show that would teach about the world of insects, but after a lot of reworking, it was decided that the upcoming Pixar film, A Bug's Life, would work as the perfect thematic adaptation. While it's not the most educational show, it does broadly cover the function of different insects and arachnids, while also teaching that they are beneficial as pollinators and decomposers. In exploring different facets of how humanity interacts with animals, Animal Kingdom was conceptualized with two lands that tackled the more thrilling side of that relationship. First, a land that brought you back to the prehistoric era to encounter dinosaurs was pitched as a way to explore our relationships to extinct animals of the past. Second, a land that explored animals of myth and their role in storytelling was developed as Beastly Kingdom. On entering over a bridge, park guests would have encountered an island where they could witness a fantastic topiary castle off in the distance, and from here, the land split into two sides. On the right was the good side of fantasy, which featured two attractions. First was Quest of the Unicorn, an extensive hedge maze full of fantasy elements that eventually led to a magical cave that featured an impressive unicorn animatronic. The other attraction was Fantasia Gardens, which was either a boat or flume ride that took you through scenes of Disney's 1940 film, Fantasia. The other half of the land was designated as the evil side, where, approaching through a dark village, you encountered a looming ruin of a castle. Named Dragon's Tower, this ride would have likely been a roller coaster that took you through the castle, where you would have thrilling encounters with the ferocious dragon. Obviously, Beastly Kingdom was never built, as it was planned as part of a Phase 2 for Animal Kingdom, and the land designated for it opened as the kid-friendly Camp Mini Mickey, which then became Pandora: The World of Avatar in 2017. Still, there are remnants of early Beastly Kingdom that were meant more as teasers, such as the dragon head on one of the ticket booths at the front of the park, or the unicorn section of the parking lot. When the park opened in 1998, a short-lived attraction known as the Discovery Riverboats would travel around Safari Village and had a few interesting sights to see, which included a teaser for Beastly Kingdom. Traveling past rockwork that looks strikingly similar to the concept art for Dragon Tower, a blast of fire would emit from a cave as if a dragon was attacking the boat. There's not a lot of surviving documentation from cast previews, but originally there were stacks of scorched helmets and armor found outside of the cave, which was likely removed for feeling a little too violent for a Disney park. While also poorly documented, there was briefly a unicorn statue on the river as well. The most interesting element of the riverboats was down by Dinoland USA, where an iguanodon animatronic stood and moved in the shallow water. Reportedly, the costs of animal care were underestimated by the company when developing the park, and a choice had to be made between either opening with Beastly Kingdom or Dinoland. While dragons were certainly exciting, dinosaurs had also proven to be popular with guests, as Disney's first attempt at these animatronic creatures premiered in the Ford Magic Skyway at the 1964 New York World's Fair. The ride took patrons on a journey in a Ford car through time, which included scenes of cave-dwelling Neanderthals, and of course, dinosaurs. The scenes depicting these impressive creatures were heavily inspired by the Rite of Spring sequence in Fantasia, and after the fair ceased operating after its second season in 1965, the dinosaurs were added to a lengthy portion of the Disneyland Railroad in 1966, where you can still see them today. This in turn inspired the Universe of Energy, a sizable attraction that opened with Epcot in 1982. In retrospect, its emphasis on fossil fuels seems comically dated, but it did teach about energy as a subject more broadly, and was mostly an excuse to bring riders right through this exciting prehistoric world. Many of these scenes were recycled from the Fantasia-inspired versions now on the Disneyland Railroad, but they were also expanded upon and obviously fit into the energy theme of the ride. While the animatronics may come off as stiff and clunky due to the era when the ride premiered, it was certainly as thrilling and exciting as it could be for its time, getting you a lot closer to the animatronics than the railroad ever has. So, if Walt Disney World already had a popular attraction featuring dinosaurs, why choose them over something new like Beastly Kingdom? To me, the answer is obviously the 1993 premiere of Jurassic Park, which reignited public interest in dinosaurs through its thrills and groundbreaking special effects, instantly dating the Fantasia depictions that Disney already had in its parks. Originally, Dinoland was conceived with a dinosaur safari attraction that would have taken place mostly outside, but according to a book titled The Making of Disney's Animal Kingdom Theme Park, then CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, asked Imagineering to rework the concept into a much more thrilling e-ticket. This was documented as occurring in the summer of 1993, and the new anchor ride, known as Countdown to Extinction, embraced a theme of abusing technology and going places where humanity really shouldn't. If you've somehow never seen or read Jurassic Park, then that's exactly the message of that story, so I don't think that Eisner wanting Dinoland developed into something more exciting, with a ride bringing you into terrifying encounters with more monstrous looking dinosaurs, is a mere coincidence. Before Jurassic Park had even finished production, Steven Spielberg also went to Universal executives and pitched a Jurassic Park attraction for Hollywood, which then opened in 1996 as Jurassic Park the Ride, which was obviously wildly successful. If you know the story of Disney and Universal's competition in Florida, then you'll also know that Eisner announced Disney MGM Studios to deter Universal from opening a studio park in Florida, which was then rapidly built and opened in 1989. Universal then opened Universal Studios Florida the following year, and by the mid-90s, they already had plans in place for a new park, Islands of Adventure. After many development changes, the final version of the park would be anchored by a whole Jurassic Park land, with a version of the ride in Hollywood, which was intended to open in 1999. Like with Disney MGM, Disney beat Universal by just a year by opening Animal Kingdom in 1998, with its own dinosaur-themed land and exciting but scary Dinosaur Thrill Ride. Unlike the Jurassic Park land that opened at Universal, which aimed to capture the magic of the now two Jurassic Park films, Dinoland U.S.A. was quite a bit different and was tied very heavily to that Animal Kingdom concept of exploring human relationships to animals. In contrast to the ferocious intensity of the land's single ride, Countdown to Extinction, the rest of the land embraces that tacky kitsch relationship of how Americans have viewed dinosaurs through 20th century consumer culture. Whether it's the silly plastic dinosaurs that have sparked the imagination of many kids, the many dinosaur-focused TV shows and films, or just depictions of these creatures in textbooks and science museums, Dinoland explores that culture in such a strong way with an immense quantity of thematic depth. Most people walking through this land will never recognize that this is not just some silly dinosaurs, but is itself a major art piece that showcases decades of American consumer culture in relation to these extinct but fascinating creatures. In order to really understand what is being lost, I'm going to go through the different areas, explaining the story that ties the land together, and pointing out clever or funny details that I think are important to selling the narrative. When entering Dinoland U.S.A., you pass under an entrance sign that features a metal Brachiosaurus, and move over a bridge into the land itself. On your right, the Trilobites snack stand, which is a pun on the actual extinct marine arthropods known by the same name, is your first introduction to the silly camp that defines the land. However, I feel that the land truly starts once you pass under what is designated as the Olden Gate Bridge, where a Brachiosaurus skeleton straddles the structure that frames the entrance leading in. Notable here is that the skeleton is a replica cast from bones excavated in Colorado in 1900, which are on display in the Field Museum in Chicago. Immediately on entering and to the left, this is the entrance to the Boneyard, a children's playground themed as a dinosaur dig site, which begins the story of the land. Taking place in Diggs County, Dinoland is a Route 66 type of town, where in 1947, a fossil hunter discovered bones in the area, which he brought to his paleontologist friends. Recognizing the potential of this discovery, they bought an old nearby fishing lodge, which they then used as the headquarters of their new organization known as the Dino Institute, which was established in 1949. The lodge worked as quarters for the paleontologists and their interns, as well as a small museum of fossilized discoveries that was open to visitors. As time went on and the institute needed further funding, the mess hall was opened as a restaurant for highway visitors who stopped to see the museum and the dig site. Having grown too large for its current quarters and achieving quite a bit of profitability, the Dino Institute opened a new building tucked back in the forest in 1978, which carried on the name of the Dino Institute. However, by the 1990s, the organization was struggling financially, and they hired Dr. Helen Marsh, who would turn the museum around by introducing an unbelievable technology, the Time Rover, which sent tourists back in time to encounter real dinosaurs on a safari-like experience. By this point, among a massive tourism boom, the old lodge had expanded from many other functions and was now known as Restauranosaurus, a silly gag put up on the sign by an intern of the institute. All throughout the restaurant, you can see the remnants of what it once was, but the interns have still put their stamp on it through their silly antics, where you can find dinosaur puns and all kinds of dinosaur-related nonsense just absolutely everywhere. Further down the road, an old couple who went by Chester and Hester, who owned the town gas station, decided to cash in on the tourism too, converting their building into a souvenir shop known as Chester and Hester's Dinosaur Treasures. The shop is obviously full of references to its history as a gas station, but is also a campy tribute to dinosaur culture as well, filled with tons of ridiculous kitsch, just like Restauranosaurus. Beginning in 2001, Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama was introduced as an extension of the gift shop, with the couple putting up a cheap fun fair in their adjacent parking lot to capture those tourist dollars. Everything that I've just explained is a broad summary of the story behind the land, but where that narrative really comes out is by walking through and observing the details. Returning back to the boneyard, the entrance is appropriately themed by framing the entry and exit gates with scaffolding, flanked on both sides by pits of dirt, where you can see paleontology tools lying around. For example, the excavation site on the left features storage equipment, shovels, brushes, and a stack of soil sifters. Right outside of the boneyard, there are some other notable elements as well, such as this massive fossilized leg with a sign comedically designating it as the find of the day, or the actual boneyard sign, which is painted onto a stegosaurus shoulder bone hoisted above the scaffolding. If you look closely, you can see how it says established 1947, alluding to the backstory of the land, and there's also a small symbol that designates north. This is a relatively unknown Easter egg, but the shape of the bone is actually slightly modified to reflect the original layout of Animal Kingdom as it opened, which may look odd until you realize that Asia did not open until 1999. Walking into the boneyard, you'll notice that the central climbing structure is appropriately disguised as scaffolding, and it's pretty clear from the many fossils that this was a productive dig site. You'll spot many skeletons, which includes 2 Triceratops skulls fossilized as if locked in battle, and you'll even encounter the T-Rex, which signage indicates was the first fossil discovered, setting off the chain of events that created Dinoland U.S.A. Other signage has educational value about the fossils discovered, and exploring a bit, you'll walk through some shallow caves, which I imagine kids have fun exploring. You might also follow fossilized footsteps, revealing a chase millions of years in the past, where you can hear the snarl of the predator as you step where they once did. Between the fossils and educational material, you'll also obviously spot a lot of digging and construction equipment as well. While the storage areas for the equipment may appear unremarkable, especially among the high fantasy that you can find in Disney parks, what I've always liked about Animal Kingdom is how ubiquitous everyday objects help sell environments and story. For example, you may not notice this equipment hanging in tool storage unless you sit at a nearby picnic table, but it's just another small element that sells the backstory. Something that I find amusing is that the slides are actual debris chutes that are plastered with warning signs of work going on overhead, and even looking up, one detail that I liked was the shovel stuck in the scaffold. Moving up to the second level towards the back, a fenced off rest area near some slide entrances reveals the nonsense of Dino Institute interns who are goofing off and hosting a barbecue instead of digging. Details that I find funny here are the T-Rex statue, which is posed and dressed as a dog, and the whiteboard tracking fossil recovery, which is listing flippant and sarcastic names for things. Walking up to the second level in a different area of the boneyard, You then cross the Olden Gate Bridge and over to an actual tent structure, where kids are given the tools to sift through gravel to uncover the skeleton of a Columbian mammoth. Nearby, an informative sign provides a bit of educational context about the mammoth, and looking into thematic equipment storage, you'll spot interesting or comedic elements, like a hidden Mickey made from a fan and hard hats, or this Stegosaurus crossing sign. Exiting the boneyard and exploring Dinoland elsewhere, you'll find a lot of thematic nonsense in almost every corner. This includes a bulletin board where you'll find a lot of evidence of the Dino Institute interns, Disney Vacation Club and caricature booths that fit the land thematically, and even concrete benches with silly dinosaur art placed into the mold. Down by Chester and Hester's Dinosaur Treasures, there's also an odd sculpture created by Gregory Warmack, an American folk artist who created pieces out of everyday household objects, contributing to the roadside kitsch. While dinosaurs were of course the focus, the land was not without living animals though, as a small island in the middle of the pathway had rotating exhibits with live animals. While this first exhibit opens with the park containing American alligators, by the end, it was home to an American crocodile named Marley, which makes sense, as crocodilians haven't really changed much since the Jurassic period. Just around the corner, another exhibit featured Asian brown tortoises and Abdom storks, I think alluding to the fact that birds evolved from theropods, and tortoises are, well, reptiles, so they kind of fit. Right across the path from this is Restaurantosaurus, which in my opinion is the most interesting part of the land, as this is where most of the storytelling happens. First, by looking up at the water tower, you can see the word eat painted on the front, with a small but subtle Osaurus added as a joke to the side. Looking down from the tower and into the nearby ferns, you'll spot the other Stegosaurus shoulder bone that complements the one that's hoisted above the boneyard, and a small sign indicates that your table scraps will be used as fertilizer for the plants, courtesy of the Compostosaurus Club. Entering into the front courtyard of the former lodge, you'll spot the main Restaurantosaurus sign, with the roof also containing evidence of the college interns who have been shooting suction cup arrows into the back of the water tower. Up by the actual sign are two plastic dinosaurs perched on the support, which, if you make the effort to look for them, are found pretty much all over the land in absurd situations. Also in this courtyard is a basketball hoop, again evidence of the shenanigans of the interns, as well as the sign designating this porch as Pterodactyl Terrace, spelled incorrectly with a silent P for a stupid joke. Backing a bit out of the courtyard and looking right, the Dino Bite Snacks is an outside quick-serve window that would mostly sell ice cream to tourists, and above, you could spot an ironic set of shark jaws, as well as a scene of two dinosaur toys fighting over a cooler. Looking just a bit left between Dino Bites and the entrance courtyard, an old Airstream was attached to the lodge as extra quarters, which you'll be able to see later in the interior. Moving to the side of the restaurant, you'll also spot other modifications to the building, which includes a garage and storage tents. Walking around the exterior, there are a fair number of details to observe, with one of my favorites being this dumb weather vane depicting what I believe is an Edaphosaurus. Entering Restaurantosaurus from the main doors, you step into the mess hall, which is where the registers and pickup windows are located. Restaurantosaurus serves American food, which makes sense as this is an American-themed land, but the mess hall is a great place to look around and deduce the story through its decoration. The first thing you'll probably notice is what I believe is a pteranodon skeleton suspended from the ceiling, with two signs hanging from its neck, I love flying, and an arrow that points to the bathroom. Looking behind you, taxidermy fish are hanging above the entrance, alluding to the former function of the lodge, and looking to the left, the wall is decorated with many different elements. The encased bulletin boards have many funny dinosaur references, news articles, drawings, and magazines put up by the interns, and pictures of fossils taken at the boneyard chronicle part of the dig. There also seems to be miscellaneous elements such as mail, files, and cookware. Framed above the doorway is a painting of a dino nest, and above that are mounted heads of various dinosaurs, spoofing what you would find in a hunting lodge. On the right side of the mess hall, there is a fossil above the other doorway, as well as shelving with more cookware, which is surrounded by pictures of dinosaurs, including shots from the Rite of Spring segments in Fantasia, which is a fun Easter egg. Also worth noting are the chandeliers in the mess hall and throughout the restaurant, which have these awesome dinosaur-themed designs that progress along the circumference. These remind me quite a bit of what you can find in Wilderness Lodge or the Grand Californian, so it's cool to see that craft come to a place as silly as Restaurantosaurus. Once you order food from the counters, you then have the choice of seating either to the left or right, and moving left first, you enter a large room which appears to be the former gathering space of the fishing lodge, which I've determined by the large stone fireplace. However, it's clear from the sheer number of fossils and decorations on display that this is also the old Dino Institute Museum. In addition to the fossils, there are many academic books, sketches or pictures of dinosaurs, and photos of paleontologists working in the boneyard. Another Disney Easter egg found in here is a photo of Walt Disney with Brontosaurus animatronics from Ford's Magic Skyway, as well as conceptual sketches from Fantasia's Rite of Spring segment. Near the doorway into the mess hall, there's a portrait of Clarence P. Wilkerson, a fictional character who funded the early Dino Institute. Above the doorway is a lush dinosaur painting, flanked by an American flag and notably a Dino Institute flag, revealing more information to confirm that this was the former museum. Heading to the back of this room, you enter a new structure attached to the building which operated as the garage. You may notice the engine hanging from the ceiling, or the tools and automotive parts hanging on the walls or stored on the shelves. A fun element in here is that the walls are covered with finger paint dinosaurs, likely drawn with oil or grease. Off to the side of the structure, the storage tents contain additional seating, although this area was converted to a lounge in 2018, now serving beer, wine, and cocktails. You might notice a prank, a bucket of water perched above the doorway, or the stored backpacks, digging equipment, canned goods, and fossils that you would expect to find in here. Returning back to the room with the fireplace, a hallway in the back leads to the bathrooms, which is decorated with framed posters or photos from scientific textbooks or teaching material. If from the mess hall you decide to make a right, the next large dining room is what I believe used to be equipment and fossil storage. You'll notice fossils displayed on the wall, but it's also a lot of stored digging equipment and old academic posters or drawings that identify different dinosaurs and their features. The equipment here is also older, indicating that much of this has been in storage since the 1970s, judging from its design, which makes sense as the Dino Institute did move out in 1978. This room then transitions into the living quarters though, which is more up to date as the interns are still bunking in the rafters above the tables. It can be difficult to see, but among the hanging laundry, there are dinosaurs galore and evidence of college-aged antics. This sign nailed to a post establishes the dorm rules, and there are many silly elements found on the walls, which include childish pictures of dinosaurs drawn with crayons and markers, a Godzilla movie poster in French, and many books that relate to bones or digging using their titles as puns, such as Stephen King's Skeleton Crew. Other interesting or amusing elements include these Barney toothbrush holders, these insect and plant trimming display cases, a mounted Triceratops head that works as a hat rack, a painting of a dinosaur on a lake trying to grab at escaping ducks, these silly dinosaur window curtains, and a box labeled "Science Kit" in quotes, among many other things. Approaching the final room, which is known as the hip joint, this is clearly the recreational hangout area for the interns. Among sporting equipment like a kayak and a volleyball net, which looks like it can be lowered down from the ceiling, you'll also spot silly arts and crafts and other ridiculous miscellaneous items that you would typically expect to find at a college dorm. A few elements that I really like are the modified signs, which always relay back to dinosaurs or extinction, or the graffiti above the telephone, "Long live Carnotaurus." This room is also where the airstream connects to the building, which does make thematic sense, as young interns would probably find its novelty amusing. Not only does this make for a unique seating area if you're eating in the restaurant, but I think it highlights how thematically varied the seating is throughout the entire place. The hip joints tables and chairs are what 1990s breakfast diners were using as throwbacks to the 1950s, the old fossil storage and bunk room furniture is simple and made from wood, the old museum uses pieces that seem like they were made for the fishing lodge, and finally, the garage and storage tents are more industrial. The Airstream also has a jukebox, which has a selection of songs that work as puns, including Jerry Lewis's Great Balls of Fire, Elvis's All Dug Up, and U2's I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. Throughout Restaurantosaurus and more broadly throughout the land, a curated playlist with more songs working as puns would play, hosted by two announcers who would comment on these selections and make dinosaur jokes between playing them. Selections included songs from Barnes & Barnes like Ooga Booga and Sweet Dinosaur Mine, as well as other artists like Cheap Trick's Brontosaurus or George Thorogood and the Destroyers' Bad to the Bone. Moving down the street, I want to last cover Chester and Hester's Dinosaur Treasures, where nearby you can spot old gas pumps right outside of their building. Further back, there's an old detached garage, and looking at the exterior of the shop, you can see evidence of it once working as a service station. However, the exterior has many fun elements, including these obnoxious signs with awful puns that I think get overlooked by quite a few people. Some of them are actually pretty clever and accurate in portraying kitsch that you might find in roadside America, so I do like these quite a lot. On the backside of the building, there are still many details to observe that tell the story, but highlights include this sign for Ice Age air conditioning, and roof advertisements for prehistorically low prices, and Our T-Rex souvenirs are king. The painted siding of the shop also has a cartoon brachio or brontosaurus leaning out to take a bite from a painted extension of the planted ferns, and looking at the very back, I've always found this painting to be funny, with the dinosaur's eyes bugging out in fear as a volcano erupts nearby. Before walking into Chester and Hester's Dinosaur Treasures, it's worth mentioning that the main room of the fishing lodge in Restaurantosaurus has a photo of Chester and Hester themselves, which is a fun contextual detail. Walking into their shop, the interior can be overwhelming through its sheer tacky overload, but I want to point out that there's still thematic details that remind you that this is a service station, including a defunct gas pump and decorative dinosaur elements that incorporate auto parts or tools. In the center of the store, a strange, wacky green dinosaur stands tall, as every variety of toy dinosaur hangs around it from the ceiling. An interesting, often overlooked feature is the train track that is suspended from the ceiling as well, which of course has a train running the loop, full of dinosaurs either in or on top of the train cars. The train also travels through comedic scenes along the perimeter of the ceiling, which includes a volcano eruption on a tropical island, Godzilla's plural attacking Tokyo, and dinosaurs in the Wild West. I think that these are neat, as they really capture something silly that a child might do, but looking around the store further, there is so much more detail. Up by the train track, there are movie posters that relate to dinosaurs, and along the shelves, there are many toys, Coca-Cola products, and so much fun but miscellaneous junk. A unique element here is the coin press machine, which I believe is some sort of converted garage gear, and an old classic Coke vending machine and license plates everywhere really reinforce the idea that this is pure American kitsch. Among all of the detail, it's pretty disappointing that the store only sells generic Disney merch, as it used to be a lot more specific to Dinoland or dinosaurs in general, but at the very least, I enjoy that the store itself revels in its pure, unapologetic tackiness. Heading away from the tourist trap area of the town, you move back into the woods where things get a bit darker and more quiet. Along the way, you may see a sign for the Cretaceous Trail, which does have an interesting ornithomimus statue to spark some curiosity and draw you in. This trail is supposed to entice you in with more figures. It was designed to be reminiscent of when dinosaurs roamed the earth through its vegetation choices, but there isn't and never really was anything back here other than a bit of shade. There is a Corythosaurus and Pachyrhinosaurus back on the trail, but it's really not that interesting. It seems like wasted potential for something that could have been a bit cooler. Moving along the backside of Restaurantosaurus, two pillars with ferns on top frame a pathway that leads to the main attraction in the land, originally known as Countdown to Extinction. As you approach the building, in the original iteration of this attraction, the fountain outside contained an impressive statue of a Styracosaurus, which was framed by the high walls and windows of the Dino Institute. In its earliest years, a news van was also parked outside, which I assume may relate to the claim that the Institute was sending tourists back in time, but I can't find any information online about what this was actually intended to be. If the line for this attraction is fairly long, you enter and move to the right along a covered exterior arcade. If it's busy, this extends out to an exterior queue that runs through a garden, which does have some exciting and ferocious statues located along the switchbacks. I've only waded through this part of the queue a small handful of times on busy days, but its simplicity works to sell the idea of this being the outer grounds of a museum. Looping back in through the arcade, you encounter a Dino Institute logo along the stone wall, as well as a statue of what I believe is a hadrosaur being attacked by velociraptors up on a pedestal. Continuing back towards the main building, you pass by a massive ornamental head of a T-Rex, and pass by another dinosaur statue on a pedestal before entering the building. Once inside, this initial area used to have a metal cast depicting an early mammal drinking water from the pool left by a massive dinosaur footprint, which also had shelves with fossils on the wall behind it. In a major 2017 refurb, the queue did get a minor change here, which replaced this element with fossil display cases. Otherwise, the exhibits along this portion of the queue have remained the same, where you can view dinosaur skulls, a display of animals that can be traced back to their prehistoric ancestors, and cases of artifacts that may hint as to what led to the extinction of the dinosaurs. Moving through a switchback, you emerge out into the rotunda, which is visually anchored by the skeleton of a Carnotaurus, a horned predator that becomes the primary antagonist of the ride. At eye level, the walls are designed to appear as layers of rock that have formed over millions of years, with small fossil displays set into them to drive home the idea of paleontology. Above, fossilized bones are on display circling the walls of the room, which alternate with epic paintings depicting different prehistoric scenes. One appears to show a lush valley inhabited by a wide variety of dinosaurs, while its opposite seems to be from an era of early mammals and birds. The other two murals depict extinction, with one focused on the asteroid hitting the ocean, and the other showing the continued destruction as the dense dust of the impact creates lightning. Occasionally, the lights will dim and a voiceover from Bill Nye plays in this area of the queue, either talking about the intimidating reputation of the Carnotaurus, or otherwise discussing the asteroid that hit prehistoric Earth. A model of this hangs overhead, with a measuring stick depicting how far the asteroid traveled before hitting the planet. From here, you split either left or right into identical dark pre-show rooms, where you are introduced to Dr. Marsh. She expresses that she hopes you enjoyed the quaint exhibits in the old wing, but in this new era, the Dino Institute is introducing the Time Rover, a vehicle that will literally bring you back to the age of the dinosaurs. She states that the video will now switch over to the control room for a short safety briefing, where after a quick channel switch, you comedically encounter a dinosaur hand puppet saying hello, and the camera pulls back to reveal Dr. Grant Seeker. He posits that if he can bring you back from your tour to the Cretaceous period, then it stands to reason that he can bring back a live dinosaur as well. He then briefly shows you the iguanodon you're tasked with retrieving, who he tagged with a locator on an unauthorized expedition, which he implies he was caught doing, which is why he isn't allowed to travel back himself. He states that he's going to bring you back to the very end of the Cretaceous period, before Dr. Marsh steps in and interrupts, correcting him in stating that this trip is impossibly close to when the asteroid hit the Earth. She then assures the audience that they'll be traveling to the early Cretaceous period and that the coordinates are locked in, as Dr. Seeker then smugly confirms that yes, he has no access to change anything. He then goes through a brief ride safety spiel as Dr. Marsh walks out of the room, and once he hears the door close, he changes the coordinates, instructing you to follow the homing signal, where you'll enhance the transport field to bring back the iguanodon. He assures the room that they'll be back long before the asteroid breaks the atmosphere, finishing with, "Trust me, what could go wrong?" Exiting the room into a hallway, you then emerge out into the basement of the Dino Institute, where dim, flickering lights set the ominous tone. Descending down the stairs to the time transport loading bay, you'll notice wires, transformers, and high voltage signs all around the platform, indicating that time traveling can be dangerous business. Once on the center platform, a well-known Easter egg is these red, yellow, and white pipes overhead, with chemical formulas painted onto them that correspond with ketchup, mustard, and mayonnaise. This is a remnant from when Disney had a partnership with McDonald's to include their food in the parks, which for the most part just sold fries at locations like Fairfax Fries in Disney MGM Studios or Frontierland Fries at Magic Kingdom. Where Trilobites currently exists at the front of the land, this also used to be a fry stand known as Petra Fries. However, Restaurantosaurus had an expanded menu, which also included McDonald's burgers and chicken nuggets, serving up through 2008 until the partnership ended. Still, the McDonald's logo was found throughout Dinoland up to that point, and the pipes in the Dino Institute are an interesting but odd reference to that.
Now, here's the drill. You follow the homing signal to the iguanodon, then I'll enlarge the transport field, and boom, you're back with one additional passenger extra large.
The vehicles for Countdown to Extinction are also notable, in that they are the enhanced motion vehicles developed for the Indiana Jones adventure in Disneyland, which puts riders on a motion-based 3-slot car track to simulate thrilling, dynamic movement that can be programmed to a ride profile. As costs started to overrun for the development of Animal Kingdom, it was decided that Countdown to Extinction would use the same technology developed for Indiana Jones, even reusing the same track layout but with slight modifications. Once you board the Time Rover, you'll notice that the hood of the vehicle is decorated with buttons and switches, and while nobody ever seems to mention it, there's clearly an air hockey paddle just painted silver and attached to the vehicle, disguised as a dial. Once you dispatch from the station, a female computer voice announces that time travel will commence in 10 seconds, and the vehicle moves through a security scan as it parks alongside the security station. The alarm goes off as Seeker comes in over the speakers, reminding you to get in and grab the iguanodon before the asteroid hits. The doors open into a mechanical tunnel, which in the very earliest iteration of the ride had lasers that outlined a portal in front of you, as well as a pyro effect where real sparks would fly at the vehicle. Floating through the portal, the Time Rover enters the late Cretaceous period in a dark jungle, with the vehicle turning to the left. Immediately, the computer identifies a Styracosaurus as a small meteor fragment lands nearby, and Dr. Seeker declares it's not our dino. The computer warns that a meteor shower is in range, as you next pass by an Alioramus lifting its head up as it consumes another creature, and in the background, a Parasaurolophus watches over her babies as small meteors begin to fall around them. On the left, the computer identifies a Velociraptor that stalks the vehicle, and getting impatient, Seeker yells that the vehicle is locking onto the homing signal, which results in it peeling off into the darkness. While crashing through the forest, Seeker announces a big dino coming up, which the vehicle stops in front of and identifies as the Carnotaurus. Speeding away from the surprised creature, you travel through the dark jungle again, before encountering the long neck of a Saltosaurus, which grunts with distaste at the vehicle approaching so closely. Pulling away, the vehicle flips up and Seeker yells "whoops" as if running over its tail, and to the right, you pass by baby Pterodactylus perched on their rock nest as the computer declares the asteroid impact is in 90 seconds. The computer then identifies the mother simply as Pterodactyl, which in the earliest years of the ride used to fly towards the vehicle and got very close to the riders. Immediately, the vehicle disrupts a group of small Compsognathus which jump overhead, which was achieved with small rubber figures on a wire and pulley system. This effect was unreliable and often not working, so after a period of time, lights were shown on them to simulate movement. However, the 2017 refurb removed them completely, adding in projections of these creatures instead, which was a positive improvement. Immediately after this scene, you lose traction in the mud as you travel through the dark, where you hear the roar of the Carnotaurus again. Illuminated by strobes resulting from falling meteors, the monster runs up alongside you as you peel out of the mud, then twisting through the darkness as you hear its footsteps crashing through the brush behind you. Just as you think you've escaped, the Carnotaurus cuts you off for another close encounter, with a falling meteor disguising a strobe effect that works as a flash for the on-ride photo. Escaping yet again, Seeker yells to abort the mission as you actually find the iguanodon holding up a tree to let the vehicle escape. The vehicle scans to include him in the transport field as Seeker yells to forget the mission and just get out, but as you make a turn to the right, the computer announces the asteroid impact. Initially, this scene employed a machine which Disney labeled as the Vortex Generator to simulate the asteroid barreling right towards the vehicle. It was essentially an industrial-sized version of an Airzuka air cannon that utilized a fog effect to simulate the asteroid, which was pretty convincing. However, the generator was not technically reliable, and was replaced by a static head of the Carnotaurus, which slid down a track in the dark as strobe lights revealed it to terrifying effect. Quickly escaping, your vehicle floated through time and back into the mechanical tunnel as Seeker screams that you're not going to make it. Having returned, the computer declares the mission accomplished, and Seeker picks up like nothing happened, stating that you made it back and he knew you would. He continues by saying, "Now look who you brought back with you," to indicate that the iguanodon returned safely as well, who you can briefly see on a small mounted television. Originally, this ride was supposed to include a Pepper's Ghost effect, where looking into a mirror right before the station, it would appear as if the iguanodon was riding on the back of your vehicle. Still, returning to the station and walking up the stairs to what is literally called the Dino Institute gift shop, you can look up on mounted televisions which show the media from the end of the ride, with the iguanodon roaming around the facility and the scientists and security frantically scrambling around to search for him. The gift shop itself is small but appropriately themed, feeling very much like a store you would find in one of the Smithsonian museums. I like the Extinction mural, the hanging sea turtle skeleton, and the fossils and informative material mounted on the walls. The photo printing area also has great paintings of the Styracosaurus and the Carnotaurus as well. Stepping outside, you can either make a left and return to the entrance of the building, or moving to the right, there's a small covered seating area which has a spinning velociraptor fountain. Continuing along this trail, signs on your right illustrate dinosaurs that can be seen on the Time Rover tour, and heading in further, this small forested area brings you to the back of Chester and Hester's Dinosaur Treasures. So, with all this covered, I also want to discuss changes that have been made to the ride throughout the course of its life. To reiterate, it opened as Countdown to Extinction with the park in 1998, but if you're familiar with the film Dinosaur, which released in 2000, then you'll certainly recognize that the Carnotaurus are the main antagonists of the movie, and that the Iguanodon looks exactly like the main character, Aladar. Both the attraction and the film were developed with collaboration between the studio and the Imagineers, no doubt as a matter of IP synergy, with Disney banking on Dinosaur becoming their version of Jurassic Park, but that obviously did not turn out to be the case. In 2000, the ride was renamed to just Dinosaur to reflect that synergy, with the fountain now containing a statue of Aladar, and the music from the film playing in the courtyard and queue, but that's about the extent to which they're connected. Something else interesting about this connection is that originally in the tree scene of the ride, the Iguanodon was painted with stripes, just like the animatronic that could be viewed from the Discovery Island riverboats. However, the pre-show never changed from the premiere of the ride, having always shown the film version of Aladar instead. While Dinosaur is technically an IP tie-in to the park, its relation to the film is so superficial that I consider it an original attraction. I also want to highlight the 2017 refurb, which, in addition to adding some more queue elements and fixing the Compsognathus scene as already mentioned, it enhanced the ride portion with new lighting and meteor fragment projection effects. I'm a bit mixed on this, as while it does sell the chaos, it also lights up areas that were previously all in the dark, which used the movement of the vehicle's motion base to simulate a rough course, and would disorient riders, leaving them feeling vulnerable and using their imagination to anticipate what might pop out of the dark. The new lighting also completely reveals the static Carnotaurus head at the end, which now looks ridiculous and isn't nearly as frightening as when strobes revealed it from the dark. Dinosaur is also an interesting attraction in how it handles its animatronics breaking down and setting the scenes up for a B mode. For example, when the Eleoramus is not working and is removed, a bush takes its place, and static velociraptor statues are put on either side of the vehicle as if to ambush riders. When the first Carnotaurus encounter is not working, if you look to your right, there is a static statue of the monster, which is always there but is covered in camouflage netting unless needed. If the second Carnotaurus that runs at you breaks down, it is simply moved forward towards the vehicle and left in place. And finally, the last Carnotaurus at the end has an alternative statue as well, which is located up and to the left of the vehicle, which has a light illuminating it if the scene is not working. This one is never covered because the dark hides it pretty well, but if you know what you're looking for, you can still barely make it out as its teeth glow from the camera flash. Dinosaur is definitely one of my favorite attractions ever created, and I've been on it enough to have seen the B mode for these scenes, which I find to be really interesting. Still, while Dinosaur was conceptualized as the anchor for Dinoland, and it was certainly a strong one, we still have to speak about Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama. When Dinoland opened with the park, it actually had another attraction across from Chester and Hester's shop, which was known as the Dinosaur Jubilee. In this temporary tent, park guests could walk through and view real fossils, which were on loan from the Black Hills Institute and Treebold Paleontology, with cast members dressed as Dino Institute interns providing information and hosting tours. While always intended to be temporary, I appreciate that this attraction attempted to be educational, and was also fit into the story of the land as being a display set up by the Dino Institute. Adjacent to this tent was another temporary structure, the Fossil Preparation Lab, which employed real paleontologists to dig out and clean a real fossil. While many park guests thought this was fake and put on for show, the fossil was actually a T-Rex skeleton discovered in 1990 by Sue Hendrickson, which was acquired by the Chicago Field Museum in 1997, who, in partnership with Disney, shipped part of the dig to Animal Kingdom. The T-Rex was appropriately named Sue, and a replica was manufactured specifically for Dinoland, which made its way to a display in front of Countdown to Extinction. However, this building and the Dinosaur Jubilee went down at the end of 2000, and in their place, a fake parking lot was constructed and a literal roadside fair was erected in its place in late 2001. Known as Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama, the eccentric couple brought in some rides and carnival games, hoping to suck the remaining money out of tourists' wallets. Alongside the town road, new signs were put up that advertised this attraction, and heading down the road past Chester and Hester's Dinosaur Gifts, and even further past the bathroom, you'll spot an old painted billboard that advertises the Dino Institute, but was essentially graffitied with an advertisement for Dino-Rama. At the end of the road, the Diggs County billboard includes this gaudy attraction in its depiction of the town, and adjacent to this, a final sign at the end advertises Dino-Rama parking for $2. Walking under the colorful arches themselves, you'll see that Disney literally poured a parking lot, aged it, and then put in a rundown fair full of actual paid games and snack carts. Dino-Rama also opened with Triceratops Spin, an aerial carousel that does add some kineticism to the area. It also has Triceratops figures that pop out of the doors in the center, so that is a fun little flair if you can get over its garish color scheme. Across the lot, Primeval Whirl actually opened a bit later in April of 2002, but I was actually a fan of this double-sided spinning wild mouse coaster. This isn't to say that it's appropriate for a Disney park, but I did really like the lateral G-forces, and it was something that people always seemed to have fun on, which was thrilling despite its simplicity. Walking through the queue, it was part kitsch, part spoof of the scientists at the Dino Institute. The ride course itself brings you out of the station and up a lift hill, where traveling through rings that encircle the track, spinning clock hands and writing convey that you are going back in time, essentially making fun of the plot of Dinosaur. It's maybe a little too meta, because why would Chester and Hester know what's going to happen at the Dino Institute? But there are still a lot of funny gags of running dinosaurs and meteors posted all along the track. After twisting and spinning through to the end of the course, you fall down a short but thrilling dip and move through the mouth and ribcage of a dinosaur skeleton, which is also a notable element. Is a wild mouse coaster really appropriate for a Disney park? Not really, but the theming was not only funny, but was also a lot more than you've seen elsewhere for a wild mouse, so it was notably unique. It may not have achieved that level of theming of Dinosaur or the rest of the attractions throughout the park, but it was still a ride that a lot of people had fun on purely through its rough, unbanked turns and short but surprising drops. Walking around Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama, it's impossible to miss the Cementosaurus, a large cartoon brontosaurus that frames the entrance to the north side of the fair. For most of its life, it was painted yellow, but in 2016, it was repainted to green, which I feel is a lot more pleasant to perceive. Walking around the midway, it was full of fun elements like photo ops, distorting mirrors, and this fun food stand, which was designed to look like a trailer with a dinosaur sticking out from the top. Other fun elements include the Carnivore's popcorn stand, and the strength tester game framed by a cartoon T-Rex. The paid games also had fun dinosaur designs and tacky titles, such as Fossil Fueler for a water target game, or Bronto Score to shoot some basketballs. People may have hated that Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama was in a Disney park for 2 decades now, but it is admittedly very clever if you understand how it fits into the story of the land. Despite its obnoxious visual overload, the fair also added a lot of kinetic energy to the area with Triceratops Spin, and especially the many moving theming pieces of Primeval Whirl. The fate of Dinoland U.S.A. is pretty sad, because if you can appreciate its thematic depth like I do, it really is the destruction of one of Disney's best lands and anchoring rides. When it opened with the park in 1998, it was definitely underbuilt, which was also an issue with the rest of the park too, but when capacity was quickly and cheaply needed, Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama going up in 2001 wasn't really doing it any favors. I personally enjoy what Imagineers were able to do with the extremely limited budget given, but I also understand how the average person who isn't spending time in the land or knows the story only sees a literal parking lot amusement park. While it may have marginally helped with capacity when it opened, long term, I think it tainted the perception of Dinoland, cheapening the story of Chester and Hester's gift shop or Restaurantosaurus. Worse, Dinosaur, while a spectacular attraction, is hidden at the back of the land, which I think people moved on from after seeing Dino-Rama and missing the dark ride entirely. Dinosaur's lack of popularity also stems from its lack of maintenance, with its stiff animatronics now appearing rather pathetic when compared to its early years. I would excuse this as the animatronics becoming more difficult to maintain over time, but then I look at the Japanese parks run by the Oriental Land Company and see how most of their animatronics look as new as the day they premiered. Maintenance across all Disney-owned parks is abysmal in comparison, and the company can't even maintain new attractions like Rise of the Resistance very well, so I'm not really surprised at the state of Dinosaur. What frustrates me with Dinoland's replacement isn't just that Encanto and Indiana Jones are bad fits for Animal Kingdom, but that there's also a lot of potential for this land to be a lot better. In earlier concept art for the land, the Boneyard would have extended thematically to a roller coaster known as the Excavator, which put park guests on minecarts that ran through the dig site, flying through partially uncovered skeletons, and past dinosaurs created by the interns out of mechanical equipment. I don't think that this idea was actually that interesting, and I'm glad that Countdown to Extinction became the land's e-ticket instead, but I think if this had been placed where Dino-Rama stood, guest perception would be very different. While I'm certainly no Imagineer, I also produced a video last year where I proposed a coaster dark ride hybrid that has you jumping through portals back in time, taking a lot of heavy inspiration from the Excavator. It's certainly not a perfect idea, but I created it with the intent to serve the story of Dinoland, while also offering a thrilling new attraction for families who might find Dinosaur too intense. It's certainly more thought than Disney has put into this though, as leadership clearly sees this land as a problem, but executives are so creatively bankrupt that they have no real solutions other than just shoving in random IP. While Dinoland does have a history of short-lived streetmosphere, including the roaming Lucky the Dinosaur from 2005, or Professor Parker Woodson, who was accompanied by a velociraptor who roamed the land in 2014, the 2018 introduction of Donald's Dino Bash was a desperate attempt to bring more people to the land, but was done for all the wrong reasons. While originally intended as temporary, as an extension of the Disney World Incredible Summer promotion, the decorations and character meet and greets of Dino Bash have stuck around now until the end. Donald's Dino Bash is essentially a series of daily meet and greets with Donald, Daisy, Scrooge McDuck, and Launchpad McQuack, justifying its existence as birds being distantly related to dinosaurs, which was also reflected in the land's soundtrack changing, incorporating in a lot of songs about birds. There are some other characters too, like Chip and Dale dressed in dinosaur costumes, but also weirdly, Kevin from Up seems to now roam the land as well. In Disney's defense, they did hire someone to play a Dino Institute intern who hangs out at the Restaurantosaurus Lounge and plays guitar, but otherwise, random characters placed around the land really shows how awful this company is run. A cheap, out-of-theme solution to a land that isn't attracting people actively harms the atmosphere, and again, Dinoland has a lot of potential that I don't think is being utilized. My idea for a time-traveling coaster may not be the right solution, but I have to imagine that a new Dinosaur dark ride on the former Dino-Rama lot would be quite popular, even if it's something calmer like a dinosaur safari. Not only would it fix the aesthetic of the land with new buildings and landscaping, potentially even with rockwork, but it would also likely be cheaper to produce than retheming the entire land into a Disney Plus playlist. That's not to say that an Encanto and Indiana Jones ride won't bring in people, as new things typically tend to do, but long term, as the parks lose their storytelling and theming and become random billboards of Disney IP just kind of slapped onto half-baked attractions, I can't imagine that this will leave any more positive legacy than Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama did. Dinosaur may be in a sorry state, but it's still a remarkable and unique attraction, one that deserves a real, meaningful update. Dinoland 2 could be popular again with a new dinosaur-themed attraction, which would not only be cool, but would fix the landscape and public perception. A refreshed, revitalized Dinoland could be filled with Dino Institute interns providing facts about dinosaurs and wrangling people into silly pranks, which in turn would help general guests better understand the story. Dinoland as it exists is a problem for both guests and Disney, but it's so close to being great, held back by executives who do not understand their park's experience or brand, and who will destroy meaningful, culturally interesting art in favor of short-term profit and attendance bumps. Maybe you disagree, and I'll be disappointed if you do, but hopefully, by creating this more thorough tribute to Dinoland U.S.A., exploring its story and the details that tell that story, you have a stronger appreciation for the land than you did previously. There's a lot to really like here, from the funny jokes, to the way it ties into Americana and culture, to the excellent, frightening experience of Dinosaur, one of my favorite dark rides ever created. It's far too late to change Disney's course on demolishing the land now, but if you too feel that this land deserves more love and recognition, then please leave a like, allowing the story told in this video to gain more exposure. As always, if you enjoy videos like these and want to stay up to date on new releases, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button with bell notification as well.